Okay, I'd like to welcome you to the Tuesday, September 9th, 2008 joint meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Housing Authority. Mr. City Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
For council, council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero. Here. Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here.
And for the Redevelopment Agency.
Agency members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Najarian.
Here. For Housing.
Authority members Draymond.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Karazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Yusefian.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Could we hear your report, please, Mr. City Clerk?
The agenda for the September 9, 2008 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, September 4th, 2008 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And could we also hear the item at 1, please?
The item on this agenda is Director of Community Development and Housing regarding reconsideration of an inclusionary housing in lieu fee contingent waiver for a project located at 1838 South Brand Boulevard. At 1A is council motion rescinding inclusionary housing in lieu fee contingent waiver, and at 1B is council motion amending inclusionary housing in lieu fee contingent waiver.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Before we go to either of my colleagues, let me just note that I have one speaker card on this, and before I entertain a motion, I want to hear from the public.
Could I be heard before any?
Yes, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to you next. Let me go to Mr. Weaver, then Mr. Najarian.
As we all know, the state of California passed a law that said in redevelopment zones after a certain date, any developer had to include affordable housing in their project, either in it, adjacent to it, or if it's outside, twice the number. That's state law. The city had the option, as I understand it, to put in lieu fee in, as if the developer did not want to do it, they could put it in. We would take care of it somewhere in the city. The going rate, I think the time was about $38 a square foot. We settled on 17. That's state law and what this council chose to do. I put this on the agenda because I perceive that there might be two others that agree with the philosophy that the in lieu fee should be paid if the developer does not want to do the housing themselves. And if that is not true, if there are not three of us that feel that way, because once you give it to one person, the next one is going to want the same kind of treatment. And saying because somebody did a lot for the community, whatever is rationale for granting it, I think is not the right way to go. So I'm perfectly happy leaving it with the way it is, which was a compromise. But my first reaction, as I said before, was the in lieu fee should be paid. So we don't need to go any further if there are not two others that are going to agree with that philosophy.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. I wanted to have my say before any deliberations occurred. I need to be perfectly clear about my position on this issue. Dr. K did make a $500 campaign contribution to me earlier this year, and I did meet with him on 2 or 3 occasions discussing his request for a waiver of the $1 million in lieu fees for low-income housing. After my abstention last week, I heard back from several community members informing me that it was told to them that Dr. K and I had a deal. And not only did we have a deal, but I broke the deal. You don't need to be a lawyer, an ethics officer, or a district attorney to know that a deal is an agreement, a contract, a quid pro quo. It is highly incriminating for anyone to suggest that I had a deal or that any other person had a deal with an elected official. I had no deal with Dr. K. I wish Dr. K the best of luck with his project, speedy completion and successful sales of his units, if that's what the council's desire is. However, I must recuse myself from any further determination, I have a check from my campaign account in the sum of $500 made out to the American Cancer Society in the name of Dr. K. I'm sure he wishes a speedy cure to the terrible affliction of cancer. And I'm going to hand this to the city clerk and excuse myself.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Najarian. Do we have any other comment before we go to Councilmember Quintero?
Well, I have other comments to make, but on this particular issue, after the last meeting, I wrote a check to Dr. K for $500, the campaign sum that he gave me, and returned the money written in his name to do whatever he felt he needed to do with the check.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, just a subtle distinction on the information that Mr. Weaver imparted about state law and it imposing the obligation for affordable housing.
Good.
The obligation to provide the affordable housing is an obligation placed on the Redevelopment Agency. The Redevelopment Agency has the latitude of passing on that obligation to developers who develop within the project area, either through the imposition of the percentage units or an in lieu. So, subtle distinction, but I just wanted to make sure that that was understood.
That's what I meant.
Thank you, Mr. Starbird. Mr. Yusefian, did you have anything before we go to the public? Okay. We have one speaker card that has been turned in, Rodney Kahn.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members, authority members, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn, and my offices are located here in the city of Glendale. 2 weeks ago, the City Council granted our project a contingent waiver of the in lieu fee. After 2 separate and different public hearings, it was discussed and debated the merits of the project. We talked about creating 47 market rate condominium ownership units in an area of the city that had only been developed with affordable, lower income rental units. We talked about the transportation center being near our project, and that was a positive, that it was appropriate for residential units to be built near this transit center. We talked, and I'm focusing on the project, we talked about the economy. We talked about the state of the housing market. We talked about the financing that's involved. We also talked about the tax increment that's being generated as a result of the project. I think Mr. Yusefian did a kind of a off-the-cuff or napkin analysis, came up with, for instance, that the parks would be generating approximately $4 million. Mr. Starbird came back and said, no, that's not appropriate. This is a different project area. You actually get 26 cents on the dollar. Nevertheless, if you run the numbers, if this project is built, it generates a little over $1 million for parks. If this project is built, it generates a little over $1 million for affordable housing. If this project is built, it generates several $100,000 to eliminate blight in a redevelopment project area. Obviously, if this project is not built, that money does not exist. We thought an agreement was reached with the vote that was taken, and we relied on your decision. We continued to move forward with the project, securing an extension of the building permit, also discussing with city staff the ways that we could, or mechanism to put up other properties as collateral to make sure that we fulfill the in lieu fee requirement. If these units are not sold, then we will pay that in lieu fee. If a portion of the units are sold, we will pay that portion. That's something that we continued to work on. That's something that we have secured. The developer would like to build this project. This is a good project, an ownership project. I don't think we're going to see ownership projects in this area of the city within the next several years. This is an opportunity now to build this project. I asked you, please allow us to build this project. The developer is putting a significant investment into our city, and we certainly think this is going to be an asset for that area. Thank you for listening to my remarks. If you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions? Since this is our first and last speaker, are there any questions of Mr. Kahn from my colleagues? I have one. If built and sold, you mean?
Excuse me?
If built and sold is actually what you mean, correct?
In terms of what, Mr.
Well,
Mayor?
you said if built, it will do this, if built, it will do that, if built, the other will happen. It's not just if the building goes up, that will happen.
Mayor Draymond, if it's built and sold, those things will take place because the increase in the tax increment takes place. If built and rented, we would be paying the fee.
Correct. But what I'm saying is the impression that we build the building and these fees just come, this revenue just comes in, is not really quite accurate, because we're talking about a 5-year window.
Correct. And
What may happen with the market, the housing market, and what may or may not be built in terms of market rate housing, we don't know.
No, we don't.
That was just the clarification I was looking for.
Well, but
Yes, sir.
in terms of what you mentioned about the $1 million in park fees, in other words, the $1 million in tax increment, that would take place whether it's a rental or a condominium.
The increase...
Actually, let me ask Mr. Starbird. In other words, if 47 units are built there, regardless of whether it is sold or not sold, we still would receive a tax increment, the city would receive the tax increment from that project, correct?
Right, if there's improvements in the property, depending on their assessed value, the redevelopment agency would receive about 26%, or about 26 cents on the dollar of incremental value on the roll.
Because we're talking about two things. One has to do with whether it's going to be sold or not, and the other has to do whether it's built or not.
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments?
Not again.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Kahn. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
I
sir.
have a question of this city attorney.
Well, you have two of them right
Which
there.
one's speaking?
And one in the audience.
Well, either one.
Another
You
question.
can conference if you want to give me an answer. Now, there's 4 of us left here now. To overturn, what does it take? 3 of the 4?
A motion to rescind or amend the prior action will take 3 affirmative votes.
No, 4 left.
And it may be more academic than that, because there may not be a motion or a second.
That's right.
Mr. Yusefian.
A question from the city attorney. I wanted the speaker to speak before I make my comments. I think the news press has already said that, and it's in the website, and you can check it. I've gotten $150 from Mr. Karamatunikian. Question to the city attorney. As an agency, am I violating the FPPC regulation on the agency for accepting $150?
Neither the agency, nor the council, nor the housing authority.
And am I still under compliance with the guidelines of the new regulations we passed for?
Well, the answer to that is yes, unless you receive the campaign contribution from Dr. K or an intermediary acting on his behalf in excess of $1,000 or more since August 29th.
Okay, this happened actually on May 15, if I'm not mistaken, because I had a banquet and there were over 150 people who came up, and he happened to be one of them. I hope he enjoyed the meal, but that's it. Nevertheless, there's a lot of innuendos, Mr. Mayor, that has been put out there by one speaker about the fact that we sell our votes because we get a certain amount. I will tell that individual, I don't know where he did business in his life or how he does business. If he thinks anyone is so cheap to sell their vote for $500 or $1,000 or $5,000, then you should not have elected that individual to city council or any other position. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even hire them to clean my house. Because if that person is that cheap, that is willing to sell their integrity for money. Now, I ran for this job because I had integrity, and I still do. And whether Dr. K gives me $150 or $1,000 or nothing at all, I would vote for a project based on its merits. I think Mr. Quintero and I, it's nothing new. I think even the news press brought up the issue that when this whole in lieu business started, from beginning, while we believe there needs to be an amount, we felt the number was high at the time that we even put it in, and the economy was much better then. Nevertheless, since the day it has been enacted, not 1 cent has been collected. Part of the reason is I thought it was too high, because that area in San Fernando, this is not a center of town. It's not one of the most desirable locations in this city. Let's not kid ourselves. We know what it is. It's industrial. We wanted it industrial. Now, some people have decided to come and build some housing there, which is great. That's what we wanted. Our zoning has changed, and we want to improve it. But for us, what we're doing is there are checks and balances. We said we want home ownership. This man is willing to build home ownership. At the time, let's not forget, over the weekend and yesterday, the federal government took over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Half a $5 trillion takeover. Okay? So it tells you one thing. Anyone who's willing to take the risk, such a high risk, man, he's got a lot of courage. Risk to us is none. Risk to us is the fact if he doesn't sell, he pays the $1 million. And we still get the $1 million TOT tax for affordable. We still get the $1 million for our parks. Regardless of what happens, we still get those. So the issue is, what is the vision of this council? Do we want only rentals in this town? Or do we want to create more housing for purchase so we can increase more home ownership? And it was felt to me, as we talked last time, that in that area we wanted to allow more home ownership so it would balance out the affordable that is being built in there, so we have a more cohesive neighborhood in that area. So on this project, I think based on the staff report, I think the applicant has gone out, has worked out with the staff, come back and put the collateral that is required to do this. They're ready to move forward. It's up to us to give him the green light. Based on the conditions we have told him is, you don't sell, you pay. And so we're forcing him to build and sell. So in 5 years, if he sells nothing at all, zero, all of them are rentals, let's assume, in the worst case scenario, guess what? He gives us $1 million. What did we lose? Nothing. We got our money 5 years later, and we still get the other $1 million and another $1 million on the other one. So the risk is not on us. Part of the risk is on him to go out there and get the loan to build this thing. That's why I think I would like to stay with the deal we made. And there's another issue with me. In the past, I have had issues when council, after a lengthy deliberation on other issues, and I will tell you if you want examples. We spend many hours, we deliberate about all this stuff, and after we reach a consensus and it's done, one way or another, whether I've been on the losing side or I've been on the winning side, I've been willing to kind of live with the consequences of it. I do not go back and ask for it to be reconsidered and so on and so forth. I think this council sends a very bad signals to the public that today we voted this way, gee, we didn't think about it hard enough to vote for it differently next day. Whether it's a design review issue, whether it's a policy issue, whether it's a in lieu issue, whether it's a development approval issue, whatever that may be, I have always stuck to my guns, whether it's whatever that was, whether I was on a losing or winning. I make my decisions based on facts. And when I make my decisions, it's in my conscience, I live with it. And I think I have made a good decision. And I think this is a good decision. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yusefian. Well, I'm going to make a comment here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to make a comment here. I see it very differently than how my colleague just characterized all of this. In certain ways, we agree completely. In other ways, I just reject 90% of that. The fact of the matter is, a member of the public came forward and questioned the ethics of how this is happening. Whether he's right or whether he's wrong, we owe it to our constituents, our combined constituency, to address it. Period. End of story. That's what this body is about. So to just say simply someone made an accusation and I don't know what kind of business he does, so we should just ignore the question is, on its face to me, ridiculous. So I applaud the fact that we're looking at this. Now, I'm not sure at this very moment where my support is. What I'm saying is the discussion we have to have. Secondly, my question of and that was the issue raised by Mr. Milano. The reason I asked the question of Mr. Khan was just for anybody looking at this to have the idea that because we build it, we put up the building, or we go down this road, means that money is flowing into this city immediately, is wrong. It will not be. It will eventually be. But I just want to make that point clear. It's not to say that it's not of value. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to give the impression that if we build it, this wonderful cascade of events is just going to happen. That's not so. So let's be clear. Okay. Next, I wanted to talk about the comment of the risk and how this has evolved. You are quite right in my mind, Councilmember Yusefian. We talk about the risk to the city at this point versus the risk to the developer. You are quite right. But we've evolved to this point. This is not where we were when we first started this discussion. Where we were when we started this discussion was no waiver, no project.
Right.
So let's be clear on that as well. Right? This issue and this plan or this proposed way of doing this, facilitating this project, didn't spring up in this form right before us. It sprang up in a completely different form and has evolved to this. So perhaps under the theory we were just listening to, we should have just rejected it at that point and not entered into any more discussion because we made a decision at that point that we didn't want to go that way. No, there is debate and policies evolve. My objection to all of this, my problem with all of this, is how it is played out. My irritation is how it is played out, and it somewhat bears on Councilmember Najarian's recusal. So I want to come to that. I just want to address the process of how we got here. Okay? We were discussing this not because we were out to create a deal for one developer. This is because the issue of in-lieu fees was raised by Councilmember Yusefian several times, just since I've been here. I don't mean necessarily in his bias. He's raised it to me since I've been elected in 2007. And it's and Mr. Yusefian knows that he and I disagree 180 degrees on what is driving the lack of construction is not the in-lieu fees. Our own staff report disagrees with Mr. Najarian on that point. But that's his view, and it may be Councilmember Quintero's view. I don't know. I disagree with it, but the fact is, I do agree with him that we need to address that issue and look and see where it leads us. The reason I raise this is because one of the reasons this looks so bad and so unethical is simply because of a time crunch. And the time crunch didn't allow us to do this in the process it should have occurred. And maybe there, Councilmember Yusefian and I agree. We should have looked at the in-lieu fee as a global issue first. That's what we should have done. And come to a determination on a policy for development in the city vis-a-vis in-lieu fees. And then we wouldn't have had the situation where a developer who has done a great deal for this city has to come to the podium and appear to defend himself over influence on the council, and council members have to recuse themselves over potential or accusations of the perceived ethics issues, and we wouldn't have people running around in the community saying, I had a deal with this council member, he broke it, so I'm going to work against him in the next election. I am so offended by that, I can't even begin to tell you. Can't even begin to tell you. I'll share this with you, Mr. Yusefian. Perhaps some of the people in this chamber should put some of the money that they're talking about throwing around the community to unseat council members over this issue and elect themselves to council and see how they do up here. Anyway, unfortunately, the time didn't allow for us to do that because there was a deadline, and Dr. Karamanoukian was subject to that deadline. So if we wanted to consider the issue of market rate housing in that area, it had to be now or not at all for this project. It's as simple as that. It is not a sweetheart deal given to one developer. Now, you can agree or disagree about the process and how it occurred and in what order, but I just don't know of any other way. I had asked several times from this dais about having an appropriate amount of time set aside in the form of a waiver, not to give a special deal to Dr. Karamanoukian, but to give a special deal to this council and the people of Glendale so that we could have addressed the global issue of in lieu fees. But at every turn I was told, no, this decision about an extension to have this kind of discussion doesn't rest with us. It rests with one particular staff member who's given the autonomy to say no. And if I give this break to the developer, this particular developer, I have to give it to everybody. Or what do I say to other developers who want an extension? And my argument has been, it's not the developer that's asking for it. It's the mayor, and to some extent, some of my colleagues who may agree with me, that we needed the time to sort this out as a global policy. But that request was just tossed back at me, said, well, it's up to this one individual, and yes, it is. And he's not interested. So we have the council then forced in a position to either lose a beneficial project, and is it beneficial to the developer? Gosh, I hope so. But it's also beneficial to the city, beneficial to the residents of this city, I hope. Anyway, so long-winded way of saying that I'm teed off with the way the politics has gone down in this. And let's not forget how this issue of rescission came up. A member of the public, Mr. Milano, came here and raised the question. There wasn't a pointed accusation. He raised the issue. He said, frankly, I thought that was one of the milder jabs that Mr. Milano has taken at this council, at least since I've been here.
That is true.
And he said this raises the specter of an ethics issue, the perception of an ethics issue, and you guys should take another look at this. Okay? I said, quite frankly, if I had it to do over again, I probably would agree with Councilmember Najarian. Why? Because, quite frankly, I felt he needed support in his view. This is in the wrong order. The process has gone down in a very unhealthy way as far as I'm concerned. And I don't like the fact that one council member is being pilloried in the public simply because, gosh, I should be thinking about the citizens of Glendale and how this will look, what kind of precedent this will set. And so my colleague is being kicked all over the lot politically out there behind the scenes that we don't see in this nice, polite chamber. So I was willing to lend my support to him to try to get some kind of conclusion that made sense up here. As a result of my comment, I think Mr. Weaver, rightly so, concluded that, maybe there's a change in the tenor of the debate in such a way that the votes would be different. So, in light of what Mr. Milano said, and in light of what his colleagues said, he put forth a motion, or inquired as to how we might put forth a motion so that we could have this discussion. And I want to thank Mr. Weaver for doing that. I truly do, because had you not done that, we wouldn't have a chance to clear the air on this. We wouldn't have a chance to have a say about any of this, except sort of through the press and through the media and out on the streets rather than in an official capacity. So, in any case, those are my comments. I'll stop there for now. Councilmember Quintero.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first question has to do with the collateral. So Dr. Katamanukian will be providing $1 million worth of collateral. How is that going to work? Is that going to be in the form of a second trust deed, or what exactly? How is the city going to secure the $1 million?
Councilman Quintero, we've had a meeting with Dr. Katamanukian and his staff to discuss that issue, and they have provided several sources of collateral that we're currently in the process of verifying provide adequate security. It would be in the form of a deed of trust against two pieces of property. It would be a second deed of trust, but we believe that there is enough collateral there to secure that obligation, and we're just in the process of verifying that.
Okay. And then the next question to the community development staff: how many affordable housing units have we built in that neighborhood? With the new ones coming online in total, how many are we going to have there?
Yeah, we have built 177 units. And that excludes the last one that doesn't, it has not yet been approved.
Right, but that will, with the last one, how much will it be?
How many do we have, Peter, at...
249.
Okay, 249 low-income units. Okay. All right, well, let me start. Well, actually, let me get back to, so I've returned the campaign contribution to Dr. Katamanukian. And I don't ever go for the perception, and the perception is this. Perception is so amorphous that idea I have a difficult time sort of computing. But I just did it because I felt like doing it. I just felt after Milano came to, and I knew it was going to go up for another vote, I said, fine, I'll return the campaign contribution. Now, turning to the merits of the case, I have been against these in lieu fees from the very beginning, and Mr. Yosefian, I didn't, want to just lower them. My feeling from the very beginning was wait, even in the good times of the real estate market, let's wait until we at least have 2 or 3 projects. Let's make it 3. Let's at least have some projects built in this neighborhood, and then we can go with the in lieu fees. Now, I do agree that what killed the market rate housing there wasn't the in lieu fees. There's no question that wasn't it. It's just a general downturn in the market. There were numerous projects that had been presented that had actually been working their way through the system, and they've all gone away. And some of them were really excellent projects, work, live, loss, etc. And it didn't happen. Not because of the in lieu fees, but because of the market. Well, the issue then for me is there is a person that wants to build 47 market rate units. Quite frankly, I can't believe that he wants to build them. I'm just very surprised that he is willing to go forward with this project, but he is willing to go forward with it. And for me, the main goal, and this has been a goal for many years, the main goal is to build housing around that transportation center. No matter whether I go to the SCAG, the Southern California Association of Government meetings, or the state level meetings, or the League of City meetings, that is what every city in this state is trying to do. The state of California is offering incentives to build around transportation center. We've built 249 low-income affordable housing units there. I'm for trying to build 46 market-rate units. I hope they're sold. I hope Dr. Katamanukian is right, and my gut level is wrong, and I hope he does sell them. But the whole point is, he's going to give it a try, and I think the city should also give it a try. I think we need to revisit the entire issue, and Mr. Draymond's absolutely right. We needed to do this in a global, look at the global issue first, and then do the individual issue. But it didn't work out that way for a number of different reasons. But I do think we need to revisit the issue of the in lieu fee, in hopes that that little bit of help may be enough to entice some other another project there. In fact, there is a large rental project, market rate rental project, that's within walking distance of the transportation center. So as far as I'm concerned, I think this is the right thing to do. We will be receiving some of the tax increments, so we will have over a period of time that those 47 units, whether they're sold or whether they're rented, or whether they're rented first or sold later, whatever it is, we will be receiving the tax increment. We're talking about the in lieu fee for affordable housing. And I think we've done a lot of affordable housing in that neighborhood, and we've done affordable housing across the city. So all in all, I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of our affordable housing efforts. We can always do more. There's certainly the demand. But all in all, I think this is the right thing to do, and let's see where it takes us. Hopefully there'll be some other market rate housing that comes into the picture fairly soon. So those are my thoughts on the subject.
Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, well, it's been good. We vented and got a lot out, which is always healthy. There's nothing wrong with housing, whether it's for sale housing or affordable housing, rental housing, whatever. We need it. We need it all in Glendale. New fees put in, so the taxpayers don't have to build it. So if there's no new fees, the taxpayers will pay to build it because of the state law that requires it. The sad part in this vetting that we've done is those few people that continue to come in here or write and accuse us of taking some money, and therefore our votes are being bought. And it is so supremely ridiculous to think that a few $100 donation to any of us in a small city like we are is buying our vote on anything. If we don't have the intelligence enough to make decisions that are right for this city, well, then we don't belong up here. And it's been said over and over and again, we're being bought, whether it's by city associations or unions or whatever. And that's where my venting is. I don't like it. We're all trying to do the best with the city. And simply because I wanted to get the in lieu fees so the taxpayers didn't pay, okay, it went the other way. We're going to get market rate housing, hopefully, within the 5-year time span. And we need that. Yes, it is a transportation center. So whether it's rental or housing or a market rate, the city wins. So I have no objection to it other than what I previously said. So it's very obvious there aren't three, so why not just ask for adjournment and let's go home?
Mr. Weaver, one moment. I would like to ask the city attorney a question, and I agree with most everything that Mr. Quintero has said, except for one item, and that is the issue that there are real issues, there are issues of merit, and then there is perception. Now, I agree with him about the perception having perhaps we can argue this speaker versus that speaker. But perception is not a word that is left out of ethics issues, is it?
The answer is no, it's not when it comes to general ethics concerns. It is, however, well, actually, in our profession, we look at the legal limitations as a floor. issues of perception are something that you all individually have to grapple with, and how it appears to the public in your roles as elected officials. The law generally doesn't deal with perceptions in terms of what is legal and what is not, but it's, as I pointed out before, it's something that you should, and as part of the training under AB 1234, it's something that you ought to consider.
And that's what I was getting at. Whether something is legal or not legal does not have direct bearing on whether, in the public's mind, something has a perception of being ethical. And that is why in the ethics training that we are all required to do, maybe most recently, I don't know when you all are required to re-up, so to speak, my colleagues, but that course is laden with the word perception, because it is not just about what is legal, it's also about the perception of ethics as well. So I don't see it as quite as amorphous as perhaps some of my colleagues. However, other than that particular word, I pretty much agree with Councilmember Quintero. Now, we do not currently have a motion on the floor, so to make it official, I will entertain a motion, and let me see if I hear one.
Make a motion for the city council to adjourn.
Wait, no, you're asking for a motion.
I want to entertain the motion at
Either 1A or B.
either 1A or B.
Silence is golden.
Let's see if we have a motion. If we do not, we don't require a second, and then we can talk about adjournment. I hear none. Mr. Yusefian.
Already made a motion for city council to adjourn.
Second.
And council is adjourned.
A motion for redevelopment to adjourn.
Second. Motion for housing.
Second. We adjourn.
Thank you.